All right, everybody. So we're going to continue our conversation of friction. We began friction as a beginner, some of the things that kind of hold you back as, getting into the gym or just getting into training in general. But now we're going to kind of dig a little bit deeper into friction once you accepted your fate, once you become a gym rat, once you accepted the activity that you want to do. What are the frictions from beyond that portion into more of an intermediate, or a regular, I would say, a regular struggler now.
Yeah,
Yep.
I
And
like it.
again, this is James Vang. I've been, lifting weights for about 22 years now, going on 23. And I've been competing for roughly 17, going on 18 of those years. I also have a competition that I'm getting ready for. So that's a little bit just on my background for how I understand the friction. Okay. And then this is,
All right. Yeah, I'm Billy Bang, and I consider myself a struggler, and that's why we named this podcast the Struggler Podcast. And to me, that's just somebody who's refuses to accept things the way they are and is willing to do something about it. And I've been lifting bodybuilding style for almost a decade, over a decade, knowing what I'm doing. So that has taught me physical and mental toughness. And in this podcast, me and James just shares our experiences and the experiences and lessons of highly successful people to help you get to where you want to faster and avoid some of the stupid pitfalls and traps that we did. So let's
yes,
begin.
sir. All right. And just to kind of piggyback off of like our previous conversation, the friction that you do, what that you have as a beginner, once you get past some of that stuff, and then you kind of become more of a regular or like an intermediate, right? This is where kind of like when, if you remember the conversation of the moment I started competing a little bit in high school, I started investing a little bit more into ebooks. I started reading more into different styles of training, and I really wanted to dig deeper into the lifting aspect. So I basically dropped soccer, I dropped cross country, I basically dropped every other sport, and then I just solely focused on lifting. And some of the things that I started investing my personal money into was books about, just other successful people, kind of like the way that Billy was when he first went to the gym and he saw like some of these stronger guys and then he started following them, right? Following into that routine. Same thing with me, right? Like I go into the gym and then I'll train and then I start liking what I'm doing. And then I start investing more of my personal money into some of these things. Now, in order to invest some of your money and time, this is where part of that friction comes into play, where, as a 17, 18-year-old, I had to work a job, right? And one of the things that stopped me and Billy from the beginning during our beginning phases was just a ride, like the availability. So, one of the things that you have to get rid of as a part of your friction is the ride or the way to get somewhere, and money can no longer be a problem. How do we get rid of that portion? Billy, how did you get rid of that part?
I got a bike. I just busted walk too, but that's a difficult spot to be in. Like when you're just straight up broke, you don't even have a car yet. You're just starting to work, so you haven't even got the savings to get a car yet. That's rough. So you do kind of depend on others. But like we said in our previous podcast, I just busted walked. So it was like 6, 7 miles to school to the gym, and then 6, 7 miles back. And then I would run around Phelan Lake one time before I get back too. Um, I just had the energy at that time. But some people, their beginner might not have been like the same age that I was at that time, like 14, 15, when I had a lot of energy. Some people might be starting when they're like 30 years old right now, right? And they don't have that type of energy or time to be busting those kind of walks. So that can make things really difficult. So you're just gonna have to figure out like bus routes or whatever you need, or work out at home. I started out with just like training abs and push-ups and pull-ups at home. If that's all you can do, then that's all you can do. And it's enough for the time, but then you're gonna have to figure out budgeting and a really good transition because I know you said in the beginning there something about investment too. Investment versus expense mindset. I think that's like super critical from like a beginner to start getting into that intermediate phase is shifting that mindset from expenses to investments. So investments for me in the beginning are like wrist straps because I'd be training and bench pressing all the goddamn time. So my like wrists start hurting, my elbows would start hurting. So elbow sleeve, knees would start hurting from squatting. Because I'm just in the beginning, you just do way more than your body can handle anyways too. And so you're just putting a insane amount of stress on your joints and ligaments. So investing in self-protection stuff like that is very good. Or like belts. I got a belt too. Those are worthy investments. And then another I would say is most important investment is like a trainer. So somebody who has already done what you want to do and can show you the way. That's like the best way to save even more important than money, time, you know, because time is, I would say, is more valuable than money. But then again, to answer your question, was just asking about like transportation. Like again, you got to just do what you can do because if you can't afford a car yet and you don't have anybody who you could depend on to get the gym, then you got to just either train at home, buy home like dumbbells to work out at home. I remember we got those. I forget what kind of they were like adjustable dumbbells where you could put like it could 20 pounds and all the way up to 70 pounds. The like block dumbbell stuff. Do something like that and then get the pull up where you hook it onto the doors. So I got that. And then until you could save up enough to where you can get a gym membership or find somebody who goes to a gym that you go to and have them get you a ride. That is actually another thing that I want to talk about too. But you got anything to add first?
Yeah. So, just to kind of like contrast a little bit, so for Billy, I guess you were living in Minnesota, correct? So that means
Mhm.
a lot of the access that you had was a little bit closer. But for Georgia, when I was growing up, going to the gym or having access to stuff, you kind of needed a car. So I guess like your location
Mhm.
and your circumstances kind of matter a little bit. Specifically for me, when I started getting deeper into the gym, a part of my struggles in order to reach the next level was a car and kind of like gym access, right? So the one of the things that I kept doing for a really long time was taking advantage of those free weeks,
Oh yeah.
getting that free week, and then I will go to a different gym and do the same thing. And then I have three older brothers. So then I'll use their names and their emails to redo that same process all the way up until I started getting caught. You know what I mean? Um, but that comes a lot with like responsibility because everybody's circumstances is a little different. But I got a job when I was 15 years old, and then I was driving a car to work already to make sure that eventually the access that I have to a gym was there. At first, I used to go to a lot of different people's houses to go work out. So I knew a lot of friends that already had like a gym and they already had like maybe a little bit more established in like the lifting field. So then from there, I would just drive to their house, especially like around work, and then I would train. And I would invest a lot of my time into meeting up with these guys and trying to make my schedule work. That way I could learn what they knew, because like when you're 16, 17 years old and you're getting deeper into the weights, it's just nice to have a guy that's like 25 years old that at least has been bench pressing a little bit longer than you or lifting a little bit longer than you, kind of support you or even just give you some tips, especially right off the bat. And then, kind of like to piggyback off of what Billy was saying, once you eventually get beyond that, this is where you have to ask yourself, like, is a trainer going to be one of the things that you want to start paying somebody or even thinking about? And a lot of the times that's like a personal, again, like a personal growth thing where you start to
Mhm.
take accountability. It's not necessarily an expense, but you are paying somebody to keep you accountable who's going to teach you the right way to do things. And then at the same time, eventually get to the point where maybe you don't need their services. So I definitely think
Hmm.
changing the mindset of expenses, or like, man, I have to pay 10, $20 for a gym membership, or I have to pay $5, $10 for gas and I don't want to waste that, to I'm investing this $10 into bettering myself. I'm investing $50 into a belt, into bettering myself. And sometimes you don't really know what is good equipment, what is the right way to eat, what is like an efficient way to train, until you start digging and investing more into yourself. So kind of like what Billy was saying about like the wrist wraps, right? I mean, when I was lifting at first, you used to just have like those regular gym belts, the one that was like that had that long tongue in the front, right? And
The
then little
generic
black.
ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that the schools all have. And then that's what you technically wear
Yeah.
all the way up until you start realizing, like, hey, I'm lifting heavier. My back is starting to hurt a little bit more, or I need to be able to like create more pressure in my abs, and I
Hmm.
might need to level my game up on the
Hmm.
belt. Same thing with wrist wraps too. Walmart right now probably sells some fairly cheap wrist wraps and things like that, or
Like,
straps,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
The Hardbringers, or the Dick Sporting Goods, right?
Yep.
All of these are little steps that you eventually have to start thinking about when you invest, when you get out of that beginner phase. And this is where that intermediate friction starts to really hit you, where you really have to start making some sacrifices. And I think this is the definite difference between like a beginner and an intermediate, because an intermediate makes sacrifices and investments. A beginner wastes time and wastes money. Like, I believe that's like their mindset on how they believe like the gym is, because if the results aren't immediate, then there's a good chance that they're probably not going to follow through. And, they always think of it like something difficult to do. But once you get beyond that, the next step is then be, what is stopping you from now doing this activity? What is stopping me and Billy from getting to the gym? And you have to ask yourself too, like, what are those circumstances? And how do you get rid of them? For me, it was a car. It was a little bit of money so I can pay gym memberships and drive to other people's houses before I got a gym membership. For Billy, he was willing to walk, ride a bike all the way up until he had to start investing into a trainer and into equipment.
Hmm.
So at the end, like when you think about the beginning phases, it's really the separation is mindset on wasting money, wasting time, to investing money and time into the things that are going to get you a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And before I go off on my tangent too, just let us know in the comments, like, what are some of your limiting either beliefs or some of your struggles that you go through. Again, James was vehicle, mine was transportation too, and just not a lot of money. So let us know what you're going through, and maybe we can help you with that. But at the end of the day, what is all that, right? All of it is just excuses, because if you really want to do it, you're gonna make it happen. Like, not having a car is just an excuse. Like, having to bust a 6 mile walk is just an excuse. But we disregarded, like James disregarded, like, I'm gonna find a way. He found a way to get there. I just did the walk. Some people aren't willing to do that, but I was like, I'm not gonna let that 6 mile walk be the limiting factor for me. So let us know what your limiting factors are. It might be something more severe than that, like you have a disability or something. Then that's obviously you have a disability, so that's different. But then don't let that be your limiting belief or what stops you too. But then we want to give you. I always want to give you guys actionable stuff, so shit that you can do right now too. So when you do get into this intermediate level now, like food choices is going to start matter. So you're gonna have to start dialing in. And how do you dial in? So first thing I recommend you, if you haven't already in the beginner step, is get a scale. You need a scale. You need to be able to measure what you're eating so that you can keep track of that. Because the only way you're gonna lose weight or gain weight is if you track those calories. And then this becomes like a personalized thing where if you want to excel faster, then you got to be more strict in your proteins, fats, carbs, you know. But then if you're not as strict, then as long as you're keeping track of the total calories, at least if you're doing like 60-40, like 60% good of the time and 40% whatever, then you're still moving in the right direction. So what does that mean? It just means moderation. But even in moderation, you need to know what your calorie cap is so that you can start improving, start seeing the changes. Um, so yeah, actionable step one right there, get a scale. And then start if you're got a budget, dude. So if money is your problem, then you're gonna want to, if you got parents that have a Sam's Club or Costco, buy the freaking chicken breast in bulk, dude. Just buy that shit in bulk and then meal prep. That's all intermediate stuff that gets interwoven in where it could kind of throw people off, but once you get it dialed in, it's the foundation. You need to get this basic stuff out of the way so that it doesn't take place in your mind where you don't even have to think about it and it's just done for you. It's one less thing to worry about because the more efficient you are with your time and your budgeting, then the less you have to worry about. And this is like a secret hack too, like the less cortisol. So what is cortisol? Cortisol is just stress. So it's like this overall, you want to limit the amount of stress you get throughout the day so that when you get to the gym, you don't feel like shit and it like takes you a long time to get into the zone. So yeah, uh, proper preparation prevents poor performance, right? So if you prepare properly, you don't have, and you're not stressed. By the time you get to the gym, you can be more efficient, more effective, more results. That's what it is.
Yep. Yeah. So just to piggyback off of what Billy was saying, like I think as a beginner, if you're trying to lose weight, I mean, the easiest way to lose weight is just to eat less. If you're trying to gain weight, the easiest way to gain weight is to eat more. But once you get past that and you get a little bit more intermediate, I think learning what like carbs, protein, and fats are and weighing what you're eating and understanding what you're eating more on a regular days basis is going to really help you. Because I know like there's a lot of people that ask me all the time, like, man, I'm eating better, but why aren't I losing weight? It's almost
Dude,
like sometimes
all
people,
the freaking time.
right? Sometimes people are even gaining weight, you know what I mean? And then, I'll just ask them very simple questions like, do you weigh your food? And almost 100% of the people that say that don't weigh their food. Now, don't get me wrong. Billy's more of a bodybuilder, so that's more their forte. But even for me, as a power lifter, once I get into competition mode or when the eating becomes a little bit more serious, even for me, I use a scale as well. And I make sure that I keep track of all of my macros to the best that I can. But if you are not competing, like Billy said, you want to do more good days than bad days. And I often remind people that every time people think that they are eating well, they're eyeballing stuff. And when they eyeball stuff, if you don't know how much you need to lose weight, or if you don't know how much you need to gain weight and you're just eyeballing it and you don't have like a set start, that's a good way for you to never make those gains, and then you're going to eventually go from like an intermediate, almost regress back into a beginner. Because a lot of the times what's going to make you from like an intermediate almost to an advanced is the consistency of it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I feel like a lot of intermediates, they regress because they don't take in that extra sacrifice or the extra investments and really make it like a part of their routine. So if you think about like losing weight, it's not like a day-to-day thing. It's more like, in my mind, more like a weekly thing. Like I think when you're a beginner, you think of food like on a daily basis. But when you become a little bit more high level, intermediate wise, you tend to think about your calories from a weekly basis. If you know that during the weekend, and Billy can attest to this, that you're going to eat big and you're going to drink, there's a good chance that 2 or 3 of those days are going to be off, and you're probably not going to have the correct macros or the correct like calories that you're going to eat, that's going to help you either gain weight or lose weight efficiently. But if you know that Saturday and Sunday are going to be your 2 bad days, then you need to make sure that Monday through Friday is solid. You know what I mean? And this is where the things like what Billy was saying is like you measuring your food and then you're meal prepping. Now,
I just want to,
yeah, go ahead.
if I could, stop right there. Yeah, good point. In the beginning, that's going to affect you a lot. Where if you have those 3 days of eating like shit, like it could throw your game off. I'm not like for a lot of beginners, it does throw because a guy I just talked to recently too. They're like, I feel like I need to lift like at least 6-7 times a day, and like they don't rest at all because that's like the beginner mindset where it's like they think they need to go hard all the time. That's like on one end of the spectrum, and then the other end is where the one that eats like shit, and it's because they eat like shit they just give up. That's the opposite on the spectrum too.
Yeah,
you wanna kind of get yourself to a medium where, okay, if you eat like shit one day, just work your way back to the medium. Or if you train too hard one day, then go back to just training where you can train hard but consistently. Because if you train hard 7 days a week, that's not sustainable. You have to do something that's sustainable. But then in the beginning, like I'm saying, that affects you a lot because your body hasn't built the homeostasis yet. Your normal is not a fit body normal yet. Like I can afford to have like a whole fucking month of eating like shit, and my body is just naturally gonna keep me at 185 pounds, pretty damn lean. But if a bigger guy who only just started lifting for a month or 2 months, he eats like shit for 1 week, that'll throw him all the way back to square zero. So timing does matter. You have to be lifting for long enough for your body's homeostasis to already be at like a fit level where this doesn't affect you that much, where you have 2-3 days of eating like shit. So you do have to understand that too. That's a little caveat that I don't want you guys to miss.
Right. No, I appreciate that, highlighting that little moment. And then I want to highlight something that Billy said earlier too about like buying chicken breasts in bulk and things like that. You have to really ask yourself too, what is it that you can afford and what is it that you can buy all the time? And some of the things that I think people maybe don't think about is there's a good chance you may have a friend that has like a chicken farm or something like that. This is where knowing the right people, getting a good price for things like eggs, or even having, access to eggs and eating that just about every single day is going to be really, really good for you. Now, a lot of people don't think of eggs as like a go-to because maybe there's a decent amount of cholesterol in the eggs. But if you aren't like a bodybuilder, or if you're not specifically prone to have health problems by eating eggs, I would almost consider eggs like a superfood. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the things that you want to buy in bulk. And the reverse is also true for liquids. Okay. A lot of people don't consider the calories that are in the liquids that they drink. And I always tell people it's so much easier to drink your calories than it is to eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just about 90 to 95% of the people that I talk about when it comes to losing weight, they don't even think about the liquids. They'll maybe start counting, right? Maybe they'll start counting their calories a little bit on the food, but then they'll drink like 1,000 to 1,500 calories worth of coffee or soda, you know what I mean? And not even include all of those carbs and sugars into their diet as well, right? And then even more, some people don't even count their dessert. And if you really think about it, snacks and desserts are gonna be the thing that skyrockets your food or your caloric intake. So a lot of the times as a beginner going into the intermediate, this is the part of the sacrifice that you have to make, where you have to consistently focus more on drinking water and only drink certain juices at the right time. The same thing with snacks. I would almost even argue like your snacks should basically almost just become more of like your healthy foods and or maybe just nuts and salads, you know. You need to eat stuff that fills your stomach but don't add any caloric intake on top of the food that you're already counting or starting to count on a regular days basis. So when you think about really losing weight and really being efficient with that, water is going to be your cheapest thing. Focus on drinking a lot of water. That already is going to cut like a lot of your money and a lot of your caloric intake already, right? Once you get used to the water, then we can start talking a little bit more about like the other things that you should start investing into. Um, and just to kind of go back off of, let's say, your protein intakes, right?
Hmm.
This is where you have to ask yourself, is it easier to eat the food or is it easier to drink the food? And a lot of the times, a lot of newbies, they tend to go all the way left when it comes to supplements. They'll spend as much money as they can on supplements and they don't even know how to utilize it yet.
Hmm.
And I would argue that for me, as a beginner going into intermediate, you just need to focus on getting the right foods. Once you become an intermediate and then you kind of do it more on a consistent basis, this is where I would say investing into a protein shake or something like that is
Hmm.
going to be very beneficial. Now, protein is maybe what, 60 to $80 per bottle now,
Hmm.
but you have to think you're getting like 25 to 30 grams of quality protein, and there's going to be like 60 to 70 servings in that. That's almost like a steak or 6 eggs that you're getting for one scoop, and you're going to get that for maybe 2 months straight. You know what I mean? So if you
Hmm.
really think about the overall investment in a protein bottle versus food sometimes, this is where you're going to have to ask yourself, like, is that going to be worth your money? And is that going to help you achieve your goals, right? So you want to really think about your food, on what you drink, what kind of foods you can eat a lot, like chicken breasts, or invest a lot into eggs, or some for some people it's ground beef, right? Some people can eat ground beef every week, right? But that's going to be something that you're going to have to be able to do every week and then be able to count it on a scale.